Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley reporting to you from Washington, D.C. This is our Thanksgiving weekend edition. So we want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. It is the quintessential American holiday. We have to celebrate the many good things in the history of our country. We're putting aside Howard Zinn and his Chronicles of Pus and looking for a balanced picture of the lights and the shadows, but certainly not the Manichaean demonology of the modern mushhead liberal theory of history, nor yet the mad dog libertarian version, the Confederate complaints that go on and on. So happy Thanksgiving to all, and be of good cheer. Now, we have the unfolding crisis around Syria, Turkey, Daesh, ISIS, ISIL, the Islamic State, the Caliphate. And in particular this morning, we have the shooting down illegally by the Turkish government of the madman Erdogan. Erdogan is a madman. Davutoglu is a madman. The neo-Ottoman clique now in power in Ankara, right? A terrible distortion of the great Turkish nation. These political adventurers, these lunatics, right? These people claiming the right to live in the past of the Ottoman Empire. There will be no new Ottoman Empire. Sorry, boys, not going to happen. But what we have this morning is the shooting down of a Russian airplane, that is to say, a Su-24, a Sukhoi 24, called Fencer in the NATO classifications. It looks like this was done by two F-16s from Turkey, sold by the United States, needless to say. There are some other reports, even from the Russian Defense Ministry, that it was hit by a surface-to-air missile. President Putin of Russia has correctly condemned this, and he has pointed to the fact that the aircraft was in Syrian territory. In other words, the territory of a country which has officially invited Russia to provide assistance. And therefore, this is an act of war by Turkey, an act of war by the madman Erdogan and his sidekick Davutoglu. And don't be too complacent, oh Americans, because those guys under the NATO treaty have supposedly the capability to drag you into World War III for their crackpot operations. And we'll be illustrating here, as we have been, the background of this. It has to do with the fact that ISIS is collapsing militarily. ISIS is on the ropes. ISIS is being decimated. The whole northwest Syrian front is about to cave in. And it looks to me that the underlying narrative of this shoot-down, to which we will try to do justice with some details, but the essence of the thing is that this aircraft, the Sukhoi 24 Fencer, was flying over an area which is right now the main area where ISIS is collapsing. And please forgive me if I say ISIS instead of Daesh and ISIL and Islamic State and Caliphate and all these other things. Just ISIS, shorthand for that. Please bear with me. I'll try to throw in a Daesh from time to time because it seems to be some kind of an insult. So we want to insult them as much as we can, but we still have to make themselves understood. Here's what I would invite you to do. Take a look at Tarpley.net. Go to Tarpley.net right now. Tarpley.net. We have a headline that says, ISIS-Daesh positions in northwest Syria reported close to envelopment, collapse, as M4 highway supply line is about to be cut. Putin and Rouhani pledged to defeat terrorism. Well, under that, the terrorist front in northwest Syria appears close to collapse. And this is an interview I did yesterday being Monday, the 10th of November. I have to remind you now, we're not going to be exactly up to date because we're recording on the afternoon of Tuesday, the 24th of November, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, right? Paying our due to the holiday. But so here's an interview that I did with Press TV of Iran. Now, keep going a little bit further down. And here you see a map of precisely Syria with a red circle around the area of Latakia and Kassab. It is a kind of protuberance of Turkey. It's a parrot's beak, I guess we would have called it, pointed down, pointed south. The Turkish city of Antioch and the bay with Iskenderun, right on the Mediterranean, right, very close to the water. So you're going to see a map with a red circle around essentially the city of Kassab, because Kassab seems to be Kassab. It's Kassab, Kessab. It varies, right? We know the eternal problem of transliterating Arabic into English, but Kassab, Kassab, Kessab, Kassab, you're going to get it. We had a good source, and this is a source I would like to thank, who alerted us to this situation. The long and the short of it is, quote, the access of the Turkish military and terrorists to Latakia province, right, this critical part of the Assad base, the Alawite area, and again, where the Russian base is. The access of Turkish military and terrorists to Latakia province is now 100% dependent on the M4 highway, and from there to minor roads. Should the terrorist defenses collapse on positions north of M4, which is not very far from happening, then the Syrian army will have artillery control, artillery dominance over the M4 highway, and the terrorist rebel rats inside Latakia province will be doomed. So this is maybe it's a mini Stalingrad, but it's an encirclement, exactly as my headline says. It's an envelopment. It's where you trap them in a kessel, right? In a pot, as Marshal MacMahon said at one point in the Franco-Prussian War. We're in a chamber pot, and guess what's going to happen to us? That's exactly what's going to happen to these terrorist rebels in that area. Okay, so this is Tarpley.net. Go to it right now. Take a look. Look at this map. Look at our red circle. And now I'm going over to the London Guardian, and they have a continuous feed, as a number of publications around the world do, to see what's going on over there. Here I find a map. Russian warplane downed, and here we see that parrot speak of Turkey. It's called Hatay, Hatay. We see the city of Iskenderun. Iskenderun is where a lot of the terrorist forces from Libya were shipped in by NATO to then be deployed in northern Syria to attack Aleppo and all these other places. And there we see at the lower end of the parrot speak of Turkey, they have their red circle too, area where plane crashed. So check out my red circle, and then check out the Guardian's red circle. Surprise! I think their red circle falls within the one that we put up on the morning briefing last night, before any of this happened. So what do we learn? We learned that our morning briefing is required reading. That's the first thing we learned. But now we're going to tell you what else we learned in just a second here on World Crisis Radio. Welcome to the next segment now of World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. And again, it's the afternoon of Tuesday, the 24th of November. We're taping early because of the Thanksgiving holiday. I hope in the very near future we're also going to be able to come to you for an hour a day of audio video. In other words, an internet TV service, which in addition to our current World Crisis Radio, right, on top of it, in my intentions anyway, we'll be able to keep up with these things a little bit more. But right now, we can give you, I think, the conceptual overview, which probably will not change through Thanksgiving weekend. So we're talking, for those of us joining us now, Sukhoi 24 Fencer aircraft of the Russian Air Force has been shot down by the bandits of Erdogan and Davutoglu, the mad dogs of Turkey. I'm sorry, I'm a friend of Turkey, but Erdogan and Davutoglu have to go. Therefore, we have a Russo-Turkish crisis. Go back to the beginning of the 19th century, you're going to see that there's a Russo-Turkish war about every 20 to 25 years. God forbid. We don't want it. It must be avoided. So it is an act of war, and I would just stress again, the reason that this is happening, in my view, is that the terrorist positions in that southernmost corner of Turkey, this parrot's beak, this protuberance of Turkey, which sticks down along the Mediterranean coast. It includes Antioch, and it approaches the Syrian town of Kasab. Go to tarpley.net, take a look at that article. ISIS-Daesh positions in northwest Syria are close to envelopment. The terrorist front in northwest Syria appears close to collapse. It is a desperation move by Erdogan in the light of the fact that his terrorist irregular army, his CIA secret army, that he has now increasingly taken over, is in bad shape. It's being bombed by the Russians. It's being pressed by the very brave Syrian Arab army. And a whole army, right? Like von Paulus at Stalingrad, his whole congeries of terrorists there in the northwest corner of Syria, the far south of Turkey, they're about to be rolled up. They're going to be wiped out. They're going to be taken and pocketed. It's going to be a pocket. It's going to be not the battle of the Falaise pocket. It's going to be the battle of the Kasab pocket, and lots of terrorists are going to be ending up there. So look at that red circle that we had last night, 12 hours ago, and then switch over to the Guardian. Again, the page I see, Russian warplane downed, their circle, area where plane crashed, and it's exactly this area of Kasab. So my hypothesis is this is a Russian reconnaissance aircraft which has been sent to get the picture on the front. Where are the terrorist rebels? Are they retreating? Because a lot of them are. A lot of them are deserting. A lot of them are just going over the hill, right? They're bugging out. Terrorists bug. So the plane is flying over them, and the Turks freak out, and they then start shooting. Now, here's the other thing. The Turkish rules of engagement are themselves a flagrant violation of international law and proper international practice. This is absolutely inadmissible. We had a woman on the National Public Radio, right, morning edition today, between 9 and 10 a.m. Eastern Time. So this woman is a Turkish journalist. I don't have her name. We'll find it. I'll put it up on Twitter later today when I get the chance. So she says, the Turks have rules of engagement. Or she just says, there are rules of engagement. And the rule of engagement is, if you get within 8 kilometers of the Turkish border in the air, then they'll shoot you down. Oh, is that right? And then she didn't mention this, but then there's the other one is, if you have land forces and they get within 15 kilometers of the Turkish border, then they'll start shooting at you. In other words, if the Syrian Arab army proposes to march up to its own frontier, its own legal, internationally recognized border, long-standing with Turkey, as soon as you cross the 15-kilometer mark, the Turks will start shooting. Now, of course, the obvious question was, hey, lady, whose damn rules of engagement are those? Those are illegal. And these are, of course, the rules of engagement proclaimed and promulgated by Mad Dog Erdogan and Mad Dog Davutoglu. Speaking kindly, you can't do that. You can't say, I'm carving a zone out of my neighboring country, and this would essentially put Windsor, Ontario, under the purview of the U.S., and on and on and on, right? You just can't do this, but they do it. So the idea is, when the Turks say we engage them in conformity with our long-standing rules of engagement, they're talking about rules of engagement which are flagrant violations of international law in themselves. They are aggressive and unfriendly act, as the Russian foreign minister, I think, said today. Unfriendly act, yeah, it's an unfriendly act indeed to do this. So there is no doubt that from the point of view of the United States, or anybody really in the world with a brain, you'd have to say this was an act of war. The Turks started shooting at a Russian plane that was over Syrian airspace. The Russian view, I think, as of this morning anyway, was that I think there were two Sukhoi 24 fencers on the scene, and the closest that one of them got was 1 kilometer from the Turkish border, which is fine. You're over Syria, and that when this plane was then shot down illegally with an act of war by this Mad Dog Erdogan and company, then the wreckage fell 4 kilometers inside Syria. However, unfortunately, when you are 4 kilometers inside Syria there, right, since the Turkish rebellion, the Syrian rebellion, the Syrian rebellion is overwhelmingly staffed and stoked by foreigners, extraneous to Syria, foreign fighters, trucked in with Saudi Arabian money and Turkish logistics, the deliveries that bring it all in there. It means that you're violating the entire scheme of international law, and the area where they came down was held by terrorist rebels. We'll be back, I think, in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. It's our Thanksgiving program, and we should be talking about Thanksgiving. We should talk about America. We should talk about the blessings of abundance. And, of course, abundance has to be produced, not only distributed, but before you can distribute it, you got to produce it. So we have the ideology of abundance, and that's not bad. That's a good thing. No austerity, right? Thanksgiving is the time when everybody realizes austerity is bad news, and we don't want any part of it. And, of course, similarly then, as we go through the Christmas season and the rest of the holiday season, in which everybody can participate, right? You can have these holidays any way you want them, secular, religious, it's up to you. But have a good time is the point, and celebrate abundance. So our program, however, is marred by Mad Dog Erdogan and his sidekick Davutoglu. They have ordered the illegal shooting down of the Sukhoi 24 fencer aircraft. It was over Syria. It never went into Turkey. It fell in the northern Syrian area, northwest Syrian area. You want to know where? Look at our daily briefing of yesterday. Yesterday identified this exact spot as the principal hotspot. And you can also find the same thing confirmed today, after the fact, by the London Guardian, area where the plane crashed, their red circle in their ongoing news feed about what's going on. And then, unfortunately, this area around Kassab, K-E-S-S-A-B, K-A-S-S-A-B, the problem is then that at least one pilot parachuted. He successfully ejected, but then he came down in an area held by terrorist rebels. And those terrorist rebels have committed the kind of atrocity that could lead to a world war. These vermin, these rodents, as they're called, right, starting in Libya, these are the rats, and that's what they are. So they acted out their rat essence by murdering the prisoner of war. Very serious crime. All those people would hang under the Geneva Convention. You can't kill prisoners of war. You cannot shoot at people who are parachuting out of an airplane in distress, be it civilian, military. No, you can't do that. But they did it. So they acted out the essence of the Syrian rebellion. So I say to world leaders, hey, Obama in particular, those are the people you want to have in the Syrian government, those butchers, and they'll say, oh, those are not even ISIS, right? Those are your democratic friends, right? That's Nusra or some kind of Turkmen or whatever they are. The problem is, since the Syrian rebellion is stoked from abroad by foreign forces, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the Emirates, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and all the rest of them. Plus, God, we're getting people in the Uyghurs from China. We're getting Chechens. We're getting people from Saudi Arabia, of course, on and on and on. The foreign fighters are the heart and soul, the nerve and fist of the Syrian rebellion. And a lot of them are going to pay a terrible price. So the problem now is that when this Russian pilot came down with his parachute, he was then probably killed before he hit the ground by these cynical, barbarous savages on the ground who started shooting at him. This is totally unacceptable. Now, the Russian response is understandably one of rage. Russian President Vladimir Putin called the action a stab in the back by the accomplices of terrorism. A stab in the back by the accomplices of terrorists. Okay? We will make no distinction between terrorists and their accomplices. So by terrorists. A stab in the back by the accomplices of the terrorists. Okay? Putin says there will be significant consequences. More from Putin. We will never tolerate such atrocities as happened today, and we hope that the international community will find the strength to join forces and fight this evil. Well, we do. We accept that, and we welcome Putin's call to make this now, after Paris, the occasion to smash ISIS and everything that they stand for. Now, look, the New York Times, I can't avoid quoting this here since it's on the same page. New York Times says, the incident highlights heightened friction in Syria's increasingly crowded airspace, which now includes Russian warplanes that are targeting the armed opposition to President Bashar al-Assad's embattled forces. The problem is, embattled right now is ISIS. Assad is advancing. The Syrian Arab Army, with Hezbollah, with Russian air support, is on the verge, I say, of a significant breakthrough victory. The turn of the tide, definitively. Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesman called the warplanes downing a very serious incident, but said he would not draw conclusions. It is just impossible to say something without having full information, says Dmitry Peskov. The Dogan news agency, quoting witnesses, says the warplane crashed over tents in a village and the pilots landed with parachutes. Russia's Interfax agency said the pilots ejected, and what happened to them is their investigation by the defense ministry. I'm afraid that about, some hours after that, we now have Russia Today reporting and showing a film of so here we are now with Russia Today, today, November 24th, at 14:41 in the afternoon. I guess that's Moscow time. So that would be, that's a while ago. It's eight or so hours from now, in the east of the U.S. So according to, a Turkmen brigade. So these guys, this is just irregular, Turks, right? This could be Turkish army with a different uniform. Both of the pilots were dead on retrieval. Our comrades opened fire into the air and they died in the air, says Alpaslan Çelik. See you in Nuremberg. Nuremberg necktie party for some of these characters, maybe in the offing. So he's near the Syrian village of Yamadi, and he's got a piece of the Russian pilot's parachute in his hands. Now, according to Russia Today, other reports that the two pilots may be alive. Ankara is working to secure their release from Syrian rebels, a Turkish government official told Reuters. Well, I can't believe that. So this, you get the idea. The people in this brigade said, we regretted we didn't burn the Russian on the spot. This is madness. And these are the people that Obama and Hollande, right, up to now at least, have been saying that ought to become the government of Syria, right? Because remember, the democratic, moderate terrorist rebels are these people. And there are 300 groups, and they fight each other. Now, let's just go through one or two of the things. Again, you can get this all on tarpley.net, where you should be every day. Indeed, you should subscribe. Now, after this, there's no excuse for not subscribing. Look here. We give you the red circle where it has to give it to you 12 hours in advance. And we tell you why. You don't subscribe to this, I don't know what I can do for you. Subscribe. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. Pre-recording here on Tuesday, the 24th of November, in the midst of the international crisis caused by Mad Dog Erdogan with two F-16 shooting down a Russian Sukhoi 24 Fencer reconnaissance aircraft, I think, precisely over this area, which the Tax Wall Street Party Daily Briefing had called your attention to the day before. That is to say, in the late evening of Monday the 23rd, we put out a briefing that goes through precisely the terrorist front in northwest Syria appears close to collapse. And it is. And let's just say a couple of words about this, right? It's clear right now that there's heavy fighting in the eastern suburbs of Damascus on the ground, right? So this is Ghouta. This is the area where Obama and Kerry were about to lead the United States into World War III on the basis of a trumped-up chemical attack. Please see Seymour Hersh. Two articles published in the London Review of Books during 2013 into 2014, where it explains that this was not done by Assad and that Obama even knew it was not done by Assad. Now, maybe this is, the experience of almost getting burned, incinerated in World War III. That might have cleared Obama's head a little bit. And Kerry, right? Thanks again to Putin. He's a benefactor of the American people for having headed off that war. Putin and Lavrov. They're no angels, but they saved you from World War III. So let's not forget it. Let's have a little bit of gratitude where it's really due. So that was the situation. Ghouta, right? So Ghouta now is the theater of combat, and it looks like the terrorist rebels are getting kicked out of the eastern suburbs of Damascus, specifically Ghouta, where they had come close to even the internal parts of Damascus, right? The area around St. Thomas's Gate, Bab Tuma, where you have a very nice hotel that I know of. That was under fire for a while, right? People had a hard time. Okay, so that's that. We've also got action going on in the eastern suburbs of we're in the eastern suburbs, and there's fighting going on there, and that is another area where the terrorist rebels are taking it on the chin. Finally, then, the key area, there's a large offensive against the rebels in the area of Aleppo, and that can quite possibly lead to the liberation of what is either the largest or the second largest, right? You see different views of this. It's either Damascus or it's Aleppo, the largest or second largest city in Syria. So all of the areas. I have to say now we were getting some optimistic reports from the area of Palmyra. It looks like Palmyra in the middle of this is the one area where ISIS still may be able to mount a counterattack. Therefore the Syrian Arab army is reinforcing its positions in and around Palmyra. And when I say Syrian Arab army, it goes without saying that they're often accompanied by Hezbollah, who add extra punch to this coalition, right? To these events. So there was an attempted counteroffensive by the terrorist rebels around Aleppo, and that seems to have been defeated. Okay, you look at these areas, right? You look at Damascus, you look at Homs, you look at Aleppo, and then you look at this area around Qassab. And the common denominator is ISIS is losing big everywhere. Around Raqqa. Now, Raqqa has been clobbered, right? Raqqa has been clobbered by Russia, and now it's being clobbered by France, right? The obvious thing to do with your Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier is to hit Raqqa. So they are doing that, and we're told that there's an alarm in Raqqa that they're so afraid of what's going to happen around Aleppo in particular that they've organized an emergency hysterical convoy of a couple of hundred of these Toyotas with machine guns and sent that on the roads to Aleppo. Problem being that they're getting attacked from the air. In other words, they're getting strafed, and it's apparently it's a killing field, right? They're being really heavily damaged. Who knows if any of those Toyotas or Isuzus or whatever they are will ever get near Aleppo. A couple of other things that are interesting. The principal ISIS radio station in northern Syria has been destroyed by the Russian Air Force. Now, what I'm giving you is a kind of a summary of these things, which we put together yesterday for the Tax Wall Street Party daily briefing, and that's what you should think of. So the ISIS is all their wonderful, sophisticated media skills, right? All the wonderful media skills that the American media keeps telling us about. They're going to have a hard time with that because their radio transmitter has been destroyed. The other thing, which some of these combat reports that I've seen have pointed out, is that first of all, that the rebel groups, to some extent, are fighting among themselves. These rebels that a lot of people want to make the government of Syria. They want to have them in the government. Those rebels are fighting among themselves already, right? Who's going to get blamed for the defeat, or who's going to get to use the first road out of there, right? As they come under increasingly heavy attack. The other one is Turkish Air Force would like to do much more around Qassab. And watch for this to happen now. This might well be the next step. As we wrote yesterday, Turkish Air Force units are effectively deterred by the presence of Russian S-300 and indeed quite possibly, Russian S-400 long-range anti-aircraft missiles. Those are very, very capable missiles. The British fly into this area. What the British do is they start at the Akrotiri Air Force Base on Cyprus. This is a sovereign base of the British Royal Air Force. And they fly over Turkey, and then they turn into Iraq, and supposedly the British attack ISIS forces in Iraq, right, the area that ISIS holds. So far, not Syria. It's said that Cameron is about to go to the Parliament again, right, the House of Commons, and demand authorization to do that. I would not trust Cameron. I think those British forces ought to be under somebody else's command. So I think this is now the situation. It is a desperate bid by Erdogan to prevent the coalescence of an actual international anti-ISIS coalition. ISIS represents the destruction of human civilization as we've known it. It must be eliminated, smashed, annihilated, extirpated. And there's no way around that, right? This is not the time for pacifism. It's not the time for people who, we've lived through many decades of unjust wars. The war against ISIS is a just war. Putin is waging it, and even the U.S. is waging it, which is at least something. However, the war against ISIS is being sabotaged by the accomplices of terrorism, and they are in Ankara and in Istanbul, and they have got to be exposed. It's also an argument against NATO. I don't want the United States to be dragged into a war by an adventurer, a tin pot dictator, a fascist like Erdogan. So forget Erdogan. So we'll be back in just a minute with more on World Crisis Radio. Welcome to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. It's our Thanksgiving weekend program. I sincerely hope we can get to some happier themes, but we've got to cover the very dangerous event which has occurred today. The out-of-control pro-terrorist government of Turkey has violated international law, violated Syrian airspace by shooting down a Russian Sukhoi 24 fencer on what I believe to be a reconnaissance mission over the key area of Kasab. If you want to know where Kasab is, go to tarpley.net, look at the morning briefing of the United Front Against Austerity and the Tax Wall Street Party, and take a look at the map that you'll find there, and it's got a red circle around Kasab, exactly the area where this Russian plane was brought down. And, of course, that map was posted 12 hours before any shooting went on in the air involving a Russian plane, and therefore the reason for all this was clear to our readers even before it happened. It is that the area around Kasab, other areas inside that red circle, are the areas where ISIS is closest to military collapse, to being enveloped, to being encircled, to being pocketed. In particular, all the terrorist forces inside Latakia province, and there are some, are dependent on certain very limited logistical areas. So there's a good chance that they're going to be essentially cut off and destroyed, right? Stalingrad, the model, or other similar battles. The defeat of ISIS-Daesh and its fellow terrorists is increasingly no more than a question of time. So the Russians have S-300 and S-400 long-range anti-aircraft missiles, but they didn't shoot those over the Turkish border. They easily could, but because the range is certainly there, but they didn't do that. It was the Turks who were the aggressors. And remember, the Turkish doctrine is that they demand the right to surveil your airspace, your Syrian airspace, 8 kilometers in. So they've actually created their own safe haven for terrorists, because the Syrian Arab Air Force has a hard time contending with them in that belt. And that belt, of course, is then immediately occupied by terrorist rebels. So this entire scandal cries out to the heavens: expose Erdogan, get him out of there. Obama declare that Article 5 of NATO is not operative, that there will be no intervention by the United States on the side of this adventurer and tin pot dictator. As Putin says, it is a stab in the back by the accomplices of terrorism. And that means Erdogan, and that means Davutoglu, of course. We already documented last week that many Americans, from Geraldo Rivera on Fox News to the op-ed page of the New York Times, they've understood more and more that Turkey and Saudi Arabia are your enemies. Russia is your friends. I would have to say now, in the C-SPAN comments, callers in, after the joint press conference of Obama and President Hollande of France, the first two, we had a Democrat saying, I don't care about Assad, smash ISIS. I don't care about Assad. Good, don't use Assad as an excuse to preserve ISIS. And then a Republican who said essentially the same thing. Join with France, Russia, and the rest of the civilized world for a no-holds-barred, no-punches-pulled attack on ISIS. Crush them within a month. And you're going to see, once their supply lines into Turkey are cut, they wither on the vine. They die quick. And that's what has to happen. I would have to say also, before we get to this press conference, this morning we had General Wesley Clark. Oh, my God, militarily pathetic. At least, however, he's on the party line, right? Let's just jump ahead. The party line of the White House is, we don't know. We are not sure. It's not clear. We don't know if the Russian plane had gone into Turkish airspace. Well, of course, we know that it didn't, but in somebody like Obama, right, it's great to hear. We don't know. It's not clear. We're still studying it. We don't have all the information, he said at another point. Wesley Clark, just militarily, right? He thinks of the air support for the Syrians or for anybody as purely tactical battlefield stuff, right? Where you have to have the spotters and you call in the strikes. Hey, what about strategic? Interdict the Jarablus corridor. It really comes down to a few roads. It's not that much. Block those roads. Strafe those roads. Bomb those roads. Bomb the bridges. Bomb. And then ISIS begins to slow down even more, and they begin to wither on the vine. I also have to warn you, watch out for Richard Engel on NBC. Richard Engel lives in Istanbul, so he knows pretty well that he better not offend Mad Dog Erdogan, because if he does, maybe the situation in his hometown of Istanbul there on the Bosporus is going to get too hot for him. Okay, now let's look at the Hollande Obama press conference. I was fortunate enough to be invited just now to appear on Press TV, and today, Tuesday the 24th, they may post that. In that case, please do take a look. So the idea was this. This is now Hollande coming to Washington, D.C., and then he's going to go to Moscow and meet with Putin. So he comes to Obama, and the request to Obama is the obvious: work with Russia to destroy ISIS. What in the world could stand against a combination of Russia and the United States? Nothing. Nothing can stand against that. That is going to be decisive. I would also say to Obama, fire some of your subversive generals. Fire some of those disgruntled, insubordinate characters there in the Pentagon. I saw one of them on, you see them all over the place, right? Essentially bad-mouthing Obama, right? Those guys are insubordinate. Fire some of them. And what they recommend is, it's completely irresponsible, right? They all want escalation. So, escalation. Obama says, we must avoid escalation. Obama says, we must discourage escalation. Obama, I thought in this press conference, was relatively balanced. He seems to be holding up. There are all those lunatic, psychotic neocon and humanitarian bomber voices around him saying, now's the time to attack. Look good. The press will love you. Yeah, the press. The American people won't love you if you drag them into a war on this kind of a threadbare, idiotic pretext. Obama spoke of a potential convergence between the United States and Russia. I believe that is probably what he really wants. It's going to be a whole lot better for him. So seek cooperation is another one with Obama, and uphold your traditions. Now he also goes into this thing which I actually share. On this, he essentially evokes the metaphor of the Statue of Liberty. Okay, so Statue of Liberty, most American of all, in New York City, greatest American city, and it's French. It was built by the French. In my view, how this happened was the French were very nasty during the American Civil War. Right, Napoleon III was really a bad actor. He was supporting the Confederates. He was looking for a chance to intervene. He couldn't do it because of Russia, and indeed because of Prussia. The Prussian troops on the line prevented it. But it's the Statue of Liberty, and it does say, give me your tired, your poor, Emma Lazarus. We'll get back to that in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Remember, keep up with all of this at tarpley.net, and Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed. Follow me on Twitter and on Facebook. So we're all over the place. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on the normal internet. And you get the daily briefing. Subscribe to it. It will be sent to you for free. And this is really the time to do that. And that will also give you a way to not miss a single episode of this coming television service, which we are planning to launch, I hope certainly before the end of the year, and hopefully a bit earlier than that. So again, Obama, not that bad, could have been much worse. Discourage escalation. There's potential convergence of the United States and Russia. Get this damn Assad issue out of the way. The American people don't care about Assad. They care about destroying ISIS. That is the national will. So woe to those who stand in the way. And if you, of course, Obama, go out and do that, you'll be declared the victor, and you will solve a lot of your political problems. Right? The whole problem you've got is the phony war imposed by the Petraeus-Allen clique to keep hands off ISIS, appease ISIS, don't wipe them out in the way that would have been perfectly feasible. The other thing Obama wanted to point out with Hollande is Hollande, despite the Paris attacks, Hollande is taking 15,000 Syrian refugees per year for the next 2 years. So in that context, he brings up the Statue of Liberty and the Emma Lazarus quote, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses learning to breathe free. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. And those are words to live by, I would say. That's my recipe for Americanism. And we'll hear later, my recipe for Americanism is good relations with Russia, who played a role in our Thanksgiving holiday. We're going to hear that again if you haven't heard it already. That's the big news. So this press conference, not that bad. Hollande, he says, c'est grave. It's very serious what has been done, but no escalation. No escalation. So, with Obama saying it, with Hollande saying it, with even Wesley Clark, who's tuned in, right? He's wired in, saying, we don't know, it's not clear. I think Mad Dog Erdogan is going to have a little bit of a problem selling anything very aggressive to NATO. Watch out for that guy Stoltenberg. He's a warmonger. Va-t-en-guerre. That's Stoltenberg of the NATO. Well, he's the Secretary General of NATO, isn't he? I think the Stolt comes from the Latin stultus, meaning fool. So that's him. These wonderful Scandinavian warmongers, right? Ready to fight to the last American under all circumstances. Now, I wanted to also once again, Hollande spoke of the need for cooperation between the United States and Russia. That is idée fixe, his opinion that he's maintained now ever since the Paris bombings on Friday the 13th. So cooperation between the United States and Russia, yes. And Just take this Assad issue and bracket it, get it off the table, postpone it, delay it, finesse it, do whatever you want. Get busy. Close the Jarablus corridor west of the Euphrates for 100 kilometers. In many ways, the Jarablus area with the roads that go through there, that's a lot of the ball game. But from Jarablus over to Efren to Aleppo, those are the areas that you need to interdict. That's where aviation should get busy. And, of course, Russia, quite properly, decided that they could not tolerate terrorist rebels so close to their air base near Latakia and, indeed, their naval base down there at Tartus, which I've seen myself. I drove by on the way to Banyas, going from Homs to Tartus to Banyas. We've done it, coming and going. So it's understandable that Russia says we're not going to allow a mass of terrorists to exist so close to our base. They could make a lightning thrust. They could try a blitzkrieg against the Russian base. No, drive them out. But again now, it's time to shift, I would say, from the political situation around Qassab to the strategic problem of cutting off the entirety of ISIS supplies. Remember, it is Turkish deliveries. Turkish deliveries are the lifeblood of ISIS. There's no other way to put it. So the Turkish deliver ammunition, gasoline, medical supplies, food, recruits, new psychos from around the world, new lunatics, right? Ready, cannon fodder for the next crusade. Even though some of them have lost their taste for martyrdom now that they see what it looks like. So that's the press conference, and that's my advice to Obama. Now there will be a NATO meeting in Brussels. We're going to watch that. I think that's going to be on Sunday already. But we have to remember why NATO is bad for the United States. And I have to say it once again. Do you want to be dragged into war? World War III? Look at your children. Look at your home. Look at your family. Look at yourself. You want to be dragged into World War III by Mad Dog Erdogan because he wants the new Ottoman Empire and he's got this irregular army of Saudi-paid terrorists who fought in Libya and now he's got them in northern Syria? You want to die for the sake of those vermin? The Baltic states, oh my God, the greatest pack of Nazis on earth, anywhere. The nostalgics of Nazism are in those unhappy countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. You want some tin pot demagogue there to attack, maybe he wants to blow up the Russian war memorial or something, and from there it takes on a life of its own? You want to be dragged into that? No, thank you. How about Poland? Those guys, hotheads, right? William Shirer during the 1930s said it's not clear if these people have learned the lessons of how you have a country, right? How you actually, the obvious thing was, if you're caught between Hitler and Stalin, you got to pick one of them, right? And they said, no, we're going to pick the British. Didn't work. So unrealistic thinking thrives. Look at that Kaczynski twin. Look at that guy Tusk. Those people are not realistic, to put it mildly. So you want one of them to drag you into World War III? Why don't you just tell them, fight your own battles, and you'll see them calm down, right? The idea that they have the United States behind them is the biggest of all of the so forget about NATO. Article 5 does not apply. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, our Thanksgiving weekend program. Now, I hope we have done some justice to the question of the situation now between Turkey, Syria, and Russia. It's time for war avoidance. It's time for a peace policy. One or two other things. Hollande also mentioned that he's going to be consulting not just with Obama and Putin, but Merkel of Germany and Renzi of Italy. You got to have Italy, man. You want to do something in the Med? You better get those Italian bases. You better get the Italian government on board, right? And the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier is now in the Eastern Mediterranean, and they have launched, I believe, 6 days worth of airstrikes. The problem is these commanders see it just as bombing, right? The kind of thing that Trump says, for example, bomb the blank blank out of them. You got to have a strategy. You got to have a notion of logistics, right? Remember, amateurs think of tactics. Professionals think of logistics. We got a bunch of amateurs. You can see it a mile away. Anyway, Hollande is that. Now, also, the question of goading Russia. I think we can say with some certainty that this whole thing is coordinated. Something coordinated is going on. Remember that Erdogan, together with Ukraine, right? Poroshenko. We haven't heard from Poroshenko. His policies are obscene. Poroshenko is in cahoots with Erdogan, the madman. And we know that they have this joint terrorist brigade. We know that. They're there. They've announced, right? They flaunted it. But now the electricity to the Crimea, which is Russia, always has been, Russia has now been deprived of electricity. The Crimean Peninsula of Russia, since about, 1770? This area is now without electricity. There's a blackout going on because 4 pylons have been blown up, and you've got some kind of terrorist militia there who are preventing the crews from coming in and repairing the pylons so that the electricity can be restored. Now, this stuff was covered by Minsk too, if I don't miss my guess. So this is Poroshenko's minions. He says, hey, if Erdogan can have ISIS and Nusra and all that, I please have some terrorist militias of my own? No, sorry. And here's another guy who needs to be told, we know you're ready to fight to the last American, but you, sir, are on your own. And you are told to fight your own battles. We will not be there for you. So be reasonable. Make peace. Don't expect us to bail out your demagogy. So, again, ISIS is losing, and this is a very desperate thing. Now, let's go domestic, at least for the end here. By the way, we pay attention to foreign policy because of what some of us learned during the Vietnam era, right? You can have probably one of the best presidents, certainly the best president of the second half of the 20th century in terms of domestic programs was Lyndon B. Johnson. He destroyed himself by foreign adventurism. So there is no division practically between war avoidance on the big world stage and then trying to promote the process of economic recovery. Now let's look at the Republican field. Last week was the week when the Republican Party went from majority reactionary, I think, to majority fascist. The Republican Party is now a fascist party. But within that, we have more advanced elements on the way to Stormtroop Junction. That is to say, Nazis in the Republican Party. And that's Donald Trump. We've had all kinds of names for Donald Trump, right? He's the Samson of the Republican Party. He's bringing down the Republican temple on the heads of the Republican Philistines and Babbitts, I would say. He's also the wrecking ball of the Republican Party, a little bit more modern metaphor. But above all, right now, he's a little Hitler. We have a little Hitler leading the Republican field, a mini Hitler. Look, no applause. There was no applause from any crowd in Jersey City for the Twin Towers coming down. This is absolute myth-making. This is Alfred Rosenberg, right? Myth of the 20th century. This is Nietzsche, right? It doesn't matter what you say as long as it works. Doesn't have to be true. If it gets them going, that's fine. So Trump he asserts that there was a crowd applauding when the Twin Towers collapsed on that afternoon. He also says that he could see people jumping to their deaths from the Twin Towers from his position where he was ensconced about 4 miles away. Well, 4 miles away, he must have had a 6-inch reflector or a pretty big refractor. He must have had some telescope to do that, if it's what he says. So how does this compare with Nazism? Well, it's the essence of Nazism. It's the stab in the back. The original starting point for Hitlerism is this idea that Germany was not defeated in 1918. No. They were betrayed. They were betrayed by social democrats and by liberals and other people in Berlin who refused to support the army. Now, it's a lie. We have the distinguished American journalist Symbolizes, who had the chance to interview Field Marshal Hindenburg, the head of the German military, in that time, October, November 1918. And Hindenburg admitted, this was before he got his act together, right, before he decided to develop his propaganda line. Probably Ludendorff had not yet clued him into what he should say, right? He was poorly briefed by Ludendorff and company. But George Seldy says, Hindenburg told me that the German army was beaten on the battlefield. Interesting. Beaten by whom? Beaten by the U.S. forces in the area of La Meuse-Argonne. The German salient at Meuse-Argonne had been beaten in by the U.S. forces. General Douglas MacArthur of the Rainbow Division leading the charge, right, to defeat the depleted, obviously, German army. But there is no question that the German army was defeated on the battlefield, and therefore the entire legend of the stand back is false. It's a lie. Die Legende, the legend of the stab in the back. So here's Trump. He says, look at those immigrants. They come in here and then they applaud when the buildings come down. Except it's a big lie. And he didn't wait for Goebbels to come on the scene to go for the big lie. That's what he did. Now, here's the other thing. Fascism, Nazism, involved the use of political terrorism and violence, brutality, against your political opponents. So here we have Black Lives Matter, right? Black Lives Matter sends a rep into one of Trump's mass meetings or whatever they are, right? Nuremberg rallies. So Black Lives Matter. I don't think much of Black Lives Matter. I think they're paid for by Soros. I think they're not reliable. But anyway, they have a right to do their thing, okay? Sure they do. So this guy gets beaten. The Black Lives Matter guy gets beaten up by supporters. It looks like a meeting of the German-American Bund. There's a film of that. So Trump says he deserves it. Trump condones violence. Trump condones violence. He's a fascist. He's a Hitler. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now, it is Thanksgiving weekend, so we want to thanks. Indeed, we do, for our great country. And we have to think about not just the shadows, right, where Howard Zinn always stayed focused, or Noam Chomsky, or the neo-Confederates like Ron Paul and Rand Paul, those people who have nothing good to say about our country. They even go so far afield as Austria for crackpot economics, when we have the greatest school in the world, the American system of political economy. Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, the Carey family, Matthew Carey, Henry Carey, Friedrich List, who brought it to the entire world, including the Austro-Hungarian Empire, all those railroads that he helped build, the Zollverein, the customs union, the German unification being back of many of the actual protagonists. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the populists, the Kennedy administration, and it's still alive today. Here we are. We're the tax Wall Street party. We're the party of the American system. So the other thing that we have to say is you're going to be hearing a lot of Russophobia, right? Islamophobia, it's all around us. We reject it. And then there's the Russophobia, and we reject that too with a vengeance. It doesn't mean we're anybody's groupies. We're nobody's groupies. But we assert the need. The U.S. national interest is good relations with Russia. What does Russia want? To be indispensable to all major diplomatic questions. That's great. That's what you want. Why oppose that? Don't give up anything to oppose that. You should be falling all over yourself to make that happen. So, here it is. It's September 1863, and Gideon Wells, the Secretary of the Navy, writes to Russian Foreign Minister Gorchakov saying that the United States is much gratified to learn that a squadron of Russian war vessels is off the harbor of New York. And later Wells writes in his diary, in sending them to this country, there is something significant. What will be its effect on France, French policy, British too? We shall learn in time. It may be to moderate, it may exacerbate, but in any case, God bless the Russians. Then when a friendship visit, Duke Alexis of Russia came to America in 1871, Oliver Wendell Holmes, right? He did once embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard round the world, great patriotic guy. Thrilling in war hearts that remember who was our friend when the world was our foe. Who was our friend when the world was our foe? It was Russia. Now, let's get to the point. October 3rd, 1863, Abraham Lincoln issues the proclamation establishing a yearly day of Thanksgiving. That's where it starts. Pilgrims, okay. Massachusetts Bay Colony, great. Not bad. Bringing, expanding civilization. October 3rd, 1863. The proclamation of a Thanksgiving holiday. Abraham Lincoln. Let's take a look at it. In October 3rd, 1863, what is there to give thanks for? Well, we had the Union victory at Gettysburg, 2nd and 3rd of July, 1863. At the height of the celebration, the word comes in on July 4th that Vicksburg has been liberated by General Grant, and the Confederacy is cut in two, a little bit like Sinjar, as we've been telling you. But then the news is bad. We have, in July, the New York City draft riots fomented by Confederate agents and all kinds of things. And then, in mid-September, the terrible Battle of Chickamauga, a crushing Union defeat, the second most bloody battle of the entire Civil War, second only to Gettysburg. So the question is, what did Lincoln want to give thanks for in the first week of October? And I would point out the obvious answer is that he's giving thanks for the coming of the Russian fleets, because this meant that there would be no intervention on the side of the Confederacy by the British or the French or both. Now let's take a look at the proclamation written by Secretary of State Seward. You saw him in the Lincoln movie. And here's the key sentence. In the midst of a civil war of unequaled magnitude and severity, which has sometimes seemed to foreign states, British and French, to invite and to provoke their aggression against the United States, peace has been preserved with all nations. Now, anybody reading that in October, this is the height of the enthusiasm for the Russian fleet in New York and the other Russian fleet in San Francisco. In the midst of a civil war of unequaled magnitude and severity, which has sometimes seemed to foreign states to invite and to provoke their aggression, peace has been preserved with all nations. And as I wrote, this is the same mood which underlies the Gettysburg Address of November 19th, a bit later, right? Almost with the Thanksgiving upon us. November 19th, 1863, the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery at Gettysburg Battlefield, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. This is at the absolute height of the pro-Russian enthusiasm, in particular as manifested by the gala parties, the gala balls that were held to honor the Russian officers and sailors in New York City, Delmonico's, and San Francisco. So as I said to the one of my recent occasions to give this talk, right? Don't get the rope on me quite as fast as you may want to when I tell you that the Thanksgiving holiday has a strong Russian component. Remember, if you will, right? Remember who was your friend when the world was your foe. And the idea that Putin is some kind of an enemy, this is absolute nonsense. He wants to be consulted on important world issues, and he should be, because he's going to be better on many issues than somebody else, right? Again, you don't have to be gaga, you don't have to be a groupie, but these are the realistic facts of foreign policy. So, a year and a day after the death of Lincoln, it was April 16th, 1866, Tsar Alexander II was almost killed in an assassination attempt, and later on he would be killed by those Russian anarchists. And we know that the Russian anarchists were largely run from a Russian emigre colony in London that goes all the way to Alexander Herzen or Gerzen and his paper, The Polar Star, which was the center of all kinds of nefarious activities. Right? It's all geopolitics. It's the principal clash of the 19th century, the British Empire against Russia. And indeed, the British rapprochement with China and their attempt to rebuild the British sphere of influence with the help of China. This, I think, people in Moscow ought to think about that, right? That you might be better off with the U.S. I do believe that it's true the other way. The U.S. have everything in common. Let the U.S. bring the British and the French along in the Security Council. Let Russia bring along China, and we could begin to solve problems, impose a solution beyond Abu Mazen, beyond need solutions, and above all, the solution that we need now in Syria. And then there's this Alaska in 1867, right? That was just the Russians thought that they couldn't hold Alaska against the British, and they did not want that to fall into the hands of the British, and therefore they said it's much better if the U.S. takes Alaska. So we reject the school of national self-loathing, which is promoted by the Howard Zinn, Noam Chomsky tradition, and it's also promoted by the Rand Paul, neo-Confederate, Scottish Rite, Southern jurisdiction tradition. We don't want any part of that. So we say, give thanks for a great country, see the lights, see the shadows, love good, fight evil, and we'll see you next week on World Crisis Radio.